Hello everyone. China's retaliation against American shipping companies for US fees on Chinese vessels. In addition, Trump seems to be purging dissenters in the military, almost like a military campaign. They said if you don't accept it, just resign. On the 11th, during the 76th anniversary celebration of the founding of the People's Republic of China at the National Day reception on the evening of September 30th, President Xi Jinping delivered an inspiring speech stating that achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is an unprecedented undertaking. The destruction, sympathy, and challenges from both past and present only serve to inspire us to seize every moment and maintain an indomitable fighting spirit. While Chinese leaders are boosting morale, US President Trump is, at the same time, undermining the morale of military generals. At Trump's direction, US Secretary of War Kevin Kurcith recently ordered hundreds of US military generals around the world to assemble urgently at a customs base in Virginia on September 30th. This extremely rare event led people to believe the Trump administration had some kind of mobilization plan, but it turned out to be just a swearing-in ceremony to purge dissidents. Kurcith delivered a speech at the meeting saying, "Welcome to the Department of War, because the era of the Department of Defense is over." Kurcith said the name change was intended to reinvigorate the military's martial spirit. Trump has argued for months that the name Department of Defense isn't strong enough. Kurcith then shifted the conversation to the awakening movement within the military, declaring that the era of politically correct leadership in the US military is over, and he wants to end the so-called woke culture within the military. Kurcith said the US military has promoted many officers based on the wrong reasons of race, gender quotas, and historic breakthroughs. The current leadership style of political correctness, excessive sensitivity, and protection that hurts anyone's feelings has been replaced by the current one. He said he is relaxing disciplinary rules and weakening anti-bullying protections at all levels of the military, focusing on dismantling many of the protections the military has built in response to scandals and investigations. He is ordering a review of the Department of Defense's definition of so-called lone leader bullying and bullying of subordinates. He called on leaders to exercise authority without fear of retaliation or questioning. He called for changes to regulations for disseminating adverse information in personnel records so that military leaders who have made excusable, honest, or minor mistakes do not carry the burden of those mistakes forever. However, in recent years, bullying and toxic leadership styles in the US military have been linked to numerous suicides in the US military, including that of young sailor Brandon Castle Hagerseth in 2018, who committed suicide due to bullying. In his speech, he also said that the Pentagon has been told that our diversity is our strength, a claim he finds ridiculous. They were forced to issue dazzling DEI statements, that is, diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, or LGBTQ statements, meaning those related to sexual minorities. The military was indoctrinated with the idea that there is no difference between women and men, or that it is completely normal for a man to identify as a woman. He also included the mandates for using E-carbon black or the COVID-19 vaccine on the list of the military's misguided policies. Kurcith further stated that if military leaders do not like his new approach, they should resign with dignity. The American generals in the audience showed no enthusiasm for Kurcith's speech. After Kurcith finished speaking and stepped down from the podium, the entire room fell silent until he had walked off the stage. The generals present began to applaud, seeking favor from the generals. It was normal for Kurcith to not win the respect of the American generals. He had only served in the military for 4 years, and his highest rank was only colonel. This immediately made him unworthy of even being a general's henchman. However, Kurcith's performance as a TV host was appreciated by Trump, who promoted him to chief of operations, commanding the entire army. Who would obey him then? Trump also saw the generals' reactions. When he took the stage to give a speech, he lectured them. He said, "You can applaud if you want and do whatever you want. If you don't like what I say, you can leave. Of course, your career will be in jeopardy and your future will be ruined." According to American media reports, this meeting caused anxiety and worry among the generals. Now Kurcith's politics are in turmoil. Trump has been actively restructuring the Five Nations building, having fired several high-ranking generals in recent years. In May of this year, he ordered a 20% reduction in the number of 4-star generals and admirals in the US military. This can be summarized this way. First, the awakening movement in the US military since the days of the white president may have been wrong, but Trump's military-style rule today is like a foot soldier. He calls a general and fires him if you don't like him. He even wants to prosecute officials with different political views, such as former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Milley. These actions go the other way, smack of a reign of terror. Second, it is expected that there will be a major purge of US military generals in the future. Trump will remove a large number of generals promoted by the Democratic Party, causing major upheaval in the official leadership. But if the Democrats come to power again in the future, will they bring them back? With all this back and forth, can the US military ever have truly professional leadership? If the Democrats appoint people based on politics, Trump is doing exactly the same thing now. He chooses people who obey him, not those with ability. Third, having such turmoil in military leadership isn't necessarily a bad thing when facing China. In addition, the Trump administration's Hong Kong and Macau policy is about to take effect, but the US shipping industry is still completely confused. Also, let's talk about how China is countering the US's increased fees on Chinese ships. The US's sinister plan to impose extra port and dock fees on ships built in China will take effect on October 14th, but the specific implementation details are still unclear. Many people in the US shipping industry have complained that this policy remains utterly confusing. However, China has already made a move. On September 29th, the State Council of China announced its decision to amend the regulations of the People's Republic of China on international maritime transportation. The amendment states that if any country or region takes or assists in taking discriminatory, restrictive measures against Chinese international maritime transport and its related business operators, the Chinese government will respond accordingly based on the actual situation. The decision specifies that countermeasures include charging special fees to ships from that country or region that dock in northern Chinese ports. By prohibiting their ships from entering or leaving Chinese ports, banning organizations or individuals from those countries from obtaining information related to China's international maritime transport, as well as prohibiting operators from entering or leaving Chinese ports and forbidding them from conducting international maritime transport and related auxiliary business in and out of Chinese ports. According to the South Korean Morning Post, China's approach is a preemptive move, making it clear that it will take action against any country that implements discriminatory policies against Chinese vessels. In a report on September 30th, International Military Securities said that the Office of the United States Trade Representative had earlier released a 301 investigation report on Chinese ships and logistics, and China's latest move can be seen as a response to this investigation. China's countermeasures may target American ships, including those originally under the US flag or by US companies, especially the American Shenyang Shipping Company. This company once operated trans-Pacific routes, including shipping services from China to Southern California. Shenyang Shipping Company ranked 29th in the world's currency cost companies, accounting for 0.2% of global shipping capacity. The proportion is not too large, and the number of US-flagged fleets around the world is not large either. According to the United Nations, the report shows that this proportion accounts for approximately 0.6% of the global total, with mainland China and Hong Kong accounting for the next largest share at 13.9%. While the number of US vessels is small, if China defines US-backed vessels as including those financed, listed in the US, or leased by US companies, the impact will expand rapidly. Harishina, a director at Drury Shipping Consultants, said that US private equity, banks, and alternative financing institutions are deeply involved in shipping assets. Without knowing the precise definition of the scope of China's countermeasures, it is difficult to determine their impact. However, the devil is in the details. Meanwhile, the US announcement on the 4th of imposing Hong Kong and Macau fees on Chinese ships remains shrouded in mystery. According to the US announcement at the time, in the first phase, starting from October 14th this year, the US will charge all maritime service fees to any vessel operated or owned by Chinese operators or Chinese entities at a standard rate of $50 per gross ton. This amount will increase by $30 each year over the next 3 years, reaching $140 per gross ton by 2028. However, the specific details of how this policy will be implemented remain undecided. The US Navy and Customs and Border Protection will be responsible for collecting the so-called port fees, but questions about the operational procedures and scope of application are still unclear. The US Shipping Finance Forum was held in Singapore last week, where several industry representatives bluntly stated that the US port fee policy is baffling. US authorities earlier promised to provide FAQs regarding the fee process, but have yet to release any information. It's also unclear whether vessels financed through Chinese leasing companies will be included. While details remain unclear, some shipping companies have already made plans. Overseas trade news reports indicate that Denmark's Maersk Group, a global shipping giant, and Duff & Co. have announced that they will not impose surcharges on US-bound cargoes on October 14th. Some non-Chinese shipping companies have also stated that they will transfer Chinese vessels to routes that do not stop at the US. Zhongyuan Shipping Group has also stated overseas that it will continue to serve US-bound customers. Furthermore, according to Reuters, the US is targeting Chinese ships. The US is only imposing so-called port service fees in an attempt to suppress China's leadership in maritime and shipbuilding. But global shipping companies are still rapidly placing orders for merchant ships from Chinese shipyards. A recent report released by the Center for Strategic and International Studies on September 24th showed that in the first 8 months of this year, Chinese shipyards still accounted for 53% of global new ship orders by gross tonnage. This is basically the same as the proportion of shipbuilding that China will account for in 2023, as predicted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The conclusion can be drawn as follows. First, the US is imposing port fees on Chinese ships without careful consideration, but currently has no idea how to implement it or whether it will continue. Second, due to the high cost effectiveness of Chinese shipbuilding, ship owners simply ignore the US fee policy and continue to order ships from China. Third, China has explicitly stated that it will take countermeasures against the US. The US builds very few ships, but American companies provide a large amount of insurance and financial services. If a trade war breaks out between China and the US in this sector, American financial institutions will bear the brunt. It is believed that they will